Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. I'm your host, Jace. This is a Daily Spawn episode. Once again, I'm joined by my pal, Blake Whitlow, who is the author of the reading order we're using to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Spawn by reading tons of Spawn content, getting all caught up to modern day and the Spawn universe that Todd McFarlane is creating. So, Blake, thanks for joining me.
Man, it's good to be here.
Yeah, so last couple of issues were really fantastic, all leading out of Spawn's journey through hell, where he confronted Malbolgia. He's back in the real world. Not only is he back on Earth, he now has an ally, as Blake mentioned last issue. It's kind of cool. It's Al Simmons is not on his own. He's teamed up with his old buddy Terry Fitzgerald. They're looking for evidence to take down Jason Winn. They find the evidence, but Spawn, perhaps in a fit of impulsiveness, or perhaps something Al Simmons would have done anyway, even without the powers of hell. He blows up the stash of weapons they find, and it does have the desired effect. It does bring some fallout to Jason Winn and his people that that are his customers that are buying weapons now seem a little less inclined to trust him. So in that way, it has impacted and had the desired effect. But to Blake's point last episode, yeah, now they got to go searching for concrete evidence all over again. So was it worth it? I guess we'll have to wait and see. So we're going to dive into issue number 56, and I will say it has, for a great majority of the issue, a limited color palette, which in my mind really allows Greg Capullo's line work to shine. And this might be, it doesn't necessarily have my single favorite image. I think that's still going to be 54, the final page with Al and Terry Fitzgerald embracing. But I think if we're talking about an overall issue, up to this point, this is my favorite issue, and I think it has a lot to do with that limited color palette, because it really impacts the visual storytelling and the narrative that McFarlane gives us. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. Right away, we have a very impactful cover. We see Spawn peering through the doors of, almost a dungeon-like cell. We see a nude guy there with shackles on his wrists and his ankles. His eyes are taped shut. Really powerful image, and also a limited color palette in a lot of ways. So any thoughts about the cover before we dive into the issue there, Blake?
It's interesting. I love how the covers always give you kind of a clue as to what the story is going to feature, but not always in the most obvious or literal way. It's always metaphorical. Well, not always, but a lot of the time it can be metaphorical. And in this sense, you can absolutely see it's very clearly communicated that whoever is in this dungeon is there possibly for a reason. Maybe he knows something, and that's why he's being kept there, because his mouth is being taped shut, so he doesn't speak. What has he got? What does he know?
What has he seen as his eyes are taped closed?
And Al's peeking in on him like, maybe this guy could be useful. And like you said before, the color palette, this issue is very creative in how it executes its story. It's for the most part, a very self-isolated story. It's about a new character that we haven't met before, and he just shares his story, like what he's gone through in the events sort of tangentially connected to Spawn and Terry and Jason and all that. And it's very compelling. And the way that the story is told through the art, having that limited color palette, it just brings it all forward in a very emotional way.
Yeah, it's a fantastic issue. So let's go ahead and dive into it. You'll notice right away the title is Con, and we'll get into that. It'll be pretty obvious why it's called that in a very short order. Todd McFarlane story, Greg Capullo pencils, McFarlane and Danny Miki on inks, Tom Orzechowski copy editor and letters, colors, Brian Haberlin and Dan Kemp, as we're used to, but also a special thanks to Jason Gorder. Very short summary for 55, which is so interesting because some of the other issues where not a lot has happened in terms of action, have a giant summary. Last issue had tons of action, and it's a shorter summary. Mentions that Al was hanging out in Spawn's hideout as Spawn was researching the mission he was about to undertake. Al stumbles across the worms. Spawn's reaction to that, we talked about it, how much shame might have played a role in that and whatnot. So they do carry out the mission. They find the evidence they want, but Al can't resist sending an explosive message to implicate and endanger Jason Winn's international networking infrastructure. Yeah, like 2 sentences sums up the whole of last issue, but yeah, it felt like it was so much more than that. So as we turn to the first page, we see, right from the start, that limited color palette we're talking about. Everything is gray or black or red, and it's being narrated by somebody, and he's talking about how all he wanted was to see his family, to see his son, Brian, and his son had a favorite toy, Luke, clearly it's Star Wars, his wife, Lori, she's wearing a dress, and all she wanted to be was a mom. So again, we're not sure who this is narrating, but with this limited color palette, the images are very impactful, and we see Jason Winn there step through the door and attack this family. But you'll notice kind of in the middle of the page there, Jason Winn, as he is attacking his family right before he kills them, he sort of morphs into Genghis Khan, or at least is wearing a Genghis Khan type hat, and the narration's talking about how this guy who was hurting the people that meant something to him had become the greatest conqueror of all, and he ignored all the pleas for mercy, and he was just left after killing these people, these innocent people, with this look in his eyes of emptiness. There's nothing there, a soulless gaze, devoid of everything. So yeah, super interesting art. I talked a couple of episodes ago about if I could have one page of Capullo art, what it would be, and I used to think it probably would be a DC page. Not that I haven't been the biggest, not the biggest Capullo guy in terms. I have a lot of original art. I don't actually have a page from Greg, and I've never thought about seeking one out before. But I would seek out a page from this issue because I think this is just fantastic. It's so impactful. So we do leave kind of that those memories or that flashback behind, and the narration continues, and it becomes clear that this narration is coming from this prisoner who appears to be nude in this dark cell. He's being fed maggot infested food. It's clear that he's not exactly in a good place, in terms of, hey, yeah, he's in prison and maybe he deserves to be there, but at least his human rights are being observed. No, this guy has been thrown away in some deep, dark hole where, the people that care about him don't know that he's there. And the narration mentions that he's tortured, and he's beaten on, and he's sometimes starved. And so, yeah, he's not in a good place, and we're just not sure who he is. But even he knows that he has information that these people need, and he's managed to keep it to himself. But the isolation and the torture and the imprisonment, he's unstable. I'll say that. Like it's clear that, yeah, all the cards are not in the deck anymore, and that's implicated or implied right from the start when he sees Jason Winn as Genghis Khan, because he's thinking to himself, yeah, I hold on to as much of myself as I can, and I do that by not letting them know any of my secrets, because one of my secrets is I know how to make leaders. I know how to create conquerors. I know how to create murderers. I learned it all from him, he says. Him, it's emphasized. The great beast, Genghis Khan, the greatest warrior of this existence. But don't forget, in his mind, whoever this guy is, in his mind, Genghis Khan and Jason Winn are one and the same. So again, not all there. So we have another bit of a flashback, and we see who we assume is this guy. And you'll notice that Jason Winn has the evil, shit-eating grin on his face, and the glowing red eyes. And we assume that this prisoner is the blonde guy next to him. And again, he's talking about how because of what information he supplied to Jason Winn, that he in some way created him by offering him strategic military information and by giving him the information that he needed, and by using certain philosophies, the man who created the Mongolian Empire through brutality and terror, drowning entire nations in blood, that's what Jason Winn has become. And this prisoner, he's taking responsibility for that. He carries that guilt. And I think a lot of it probably has to do with the fact, whether it's metaphorical or not, that Winn killed this guy's family. And he's carrying that guilt around, saying, you know, if I hadn't given Winn the information I gave him, whether it was, you know, military intelligence or, you know, advice on how to, you know, take out certain targets or deal with certain people, that he wouldn't have become valuable, Winn wouldn't have become so powerful, and his family wouldn't have been threatened. Because you got to think that this guy's family was taken out because Winn saw this guy as a threat and was worried that this guy knew too much. And so maybe as a warning, and I'm speculating here, maybe as a warning, he's like, hey, whoever you are, I'm going to take out your family as a warning to say, hey, you better not ever tell people what you know about me and how I came up, or any of my back dealings or whatever it is, because, you know, you're next is the implication. So, so 2 days later, this prisoner, and we do get a closer look at his face, and it's clear that he is the blonde guy in the picture, though he looks worse for wear. They hear a bunch of commotion, and it seems the war's broken out. There's gunfire in the corridors, and he's wondering, you know, is somebody coming to break him out? Or his fear is that it's Genghis Khan that's come to get him. It's Jason Winn come to hunt him down. And so we're told that the soldiers in the cells are looking for somebody in particular, and they don't seem to find him, but he kind of hides out so they don't see him. And he's thinking, is this a rebel militia attacking, looking for, you know, our supplies, or is it him, the guy that hurt my little boy, and, you know, he's out for revenge, basically. So once this guy peers out of the cell and he sees, you know, explosions, whatever, it sort of becomes clear that this prison, wherever it is that he's being imprisoned, all that commotion he heard was Al Simmons blowing up the warehouse, was Al Simmons attacking the warehouse. So this guy is, you know, it's that tie-in to Jason Winn. Jason Winn had the weapons there. He was supplying this rebel camp. So if Winn decided, hey, this guy needs to disappear, but I don't want to kill him because he's an asset that I might need later on, as part of payment for weapons, and again, I'm speculating, as part of payment for weapons, I'm going to turn this guy over to this, foreign power, foreign rebel encampment or whatever, and say, hey, as a favor to me, keep this guy stashed away, and, you know, I'll let you know if I ever need him. But when he looks out to see the explosion again, showing he's not all there, he sees Jason Winn in the guise of Genghis Khan come riding out of the dust. So we know that's not accurate. Jason Winn was not on the ground there, but it's hard to argue with the beautiful artwork and the limited color palette. So again, it's pretty powerful emotional stuff. Doesn't necessarily move the momentum of the story forward in a lot of ways, but it definitely sells the idea that this guy feels guilt that he created this, you know, brutal, terroristic conqueror like Genghis Khan in the form of Jason Winn. So on the next page, we get the three talking heads again. They're talking again about some of the fallout for what happened with the explosion and how it seems like the State Department is trying to spin things and how it's affecting the president. The president's not looking good in terms of his foreign policy, and it's not any one big disaster, but the accumulation of like 1,000 cuts, all these little parts of foreign policy that aren't going his way, and add it all together, it makes him look weak in the eyes of the world. So when we check in on Jason Winn, he's given a briefing to his his underlings, and his phone rings. He yells at his secretary, "Hey, I told you, I wasn't taking any calls," but it turns out it's the president. So when the president comes on, it's not news that Winn wants to hear. He's telling the president, or the president tells him Winn that, "Hey, I've been on some overseas calls lately, and a lot of the local representatives haven't been very receptive to our point of view, and it all seems to be fallout from dealings with your department." And Winn's like, "Wait, what are you talking about? Like, who's raising objections?" And the president's like, "I'm not going to go into details, but whatever connections you have with all these countries, whatever deals you've made that you're not living up to, you need to fix them. You need to resolve these situations. That's it." And he hangs up on Winn. So then Winn, of course, shit rolls downhill. So he yells at his underlings. He just got chewed out by his boss in an interesting way. And so now he's screaming at his underlings. So yeah, it's clear that word has gotten around, just like Al Simmons hoped by blowing up that warehouse, that it's affected the infrastructure of Winn's network. He's not able to get weapons to the people that he's promised to. And all of a sudden, it's looking bad on the president because it's rippling out.
I actually think, before you said that this might be in the immediate aftermath of the previous issue, the way I kind of read this in this discussion between the president and Winn, I think there's a silent time skip in here, that there might be some time between these two issues of maybe like a month or two, because that one event, I don't think anyway, would have been enough to make every single associate of Winn's to be like, "Oh, we don't want to do business with you now." I think some time has passed, and that Terry and Al have been going on multiple missions and sowing that seed of distrust. And now it's like coming down on Winn. It's not like strictly implied. That's just kind of how I might be projecting or reading into the conversation.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. I would think that even more if it wasn't for the fact that it seemed like the prisoner saw the explosion.
Yeah.
But the time jump could literally happen between, this page when kind of the fallout of the explosion is impacting this prisoner, and then the talking head. Like, it could happen between these two pages.
Yeah.
Time goes on. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a valid point. But after Winn gets out the phone, he sees the person. I don't know, is he even a person? He sees the being he probably least wants to see out of anybody. Here comes the violator to poke the bear, going, "Oh, quite a temper you got there, boy. Like, yeah, things seem to be spiraling out of your control. Nice to see you squirm." And Winn's like, "I thought you were gonna help." And he's like, "Yeah, I thought you were going to get rid of Spawn and help us both out by destroying him, but he flipped things back on you, and it's kind of funny. And if I told you his name, it might actually help you to figure out what he has planned." And Winn's not, he doesn't want to play this game. He's like, what? He even says that. He's like, "I'm tired of playing your games. If you have something to say, just say it." And again, violator being violator, playing games. I'm not going to do that because my whole end game is to show hell that humans aren't fit to be spawns right now, and so the only way I can do that is if one human takes out another. If I can get, which kind of interesting, he says that. He goes, "Take out one of your own kind," but Al's technically not human anymore. But we'll leave that aside. And he just says, "Yeah, if I can show that a human can take out a hell spawn, that'll show that Malbolgia is making the wrong choice in choosing humans to be hosts for these hell spawns." So he disappears with a threat saying, "If you are as powerful as you always tell me you are, show it, or you're going to slowly fade into oblivion." So meanwhile, back on mission, and this may be an illustration of what Blake was just talking about, that Terry and Al have been busy little bees taking out infrastructure and weapons caches and whatnot that belong to Jason Winn around the world. They have tracked this prisoner to a major Forsberg, they call him, and they think that he has information that could be vital for them. So Spawn has been dispatched to rescue him. Meanwhile, we get a quick peek back at Rat City and Cy-Gor, who maybe you guys have forgotten about because he hasn't been mentioned for like, I don't think since issue 50. It's been like
It's
five
been a
issues.
while. It's been a
Yeah.
long while.
But he has finally made it to Rat City, and he's right there. You can see the throne of corpses behind him. The scent of Spawn is strongest there. So he's finally arrived at where he has been drawn to. Obviously, Spawn is not there, so he sits in patiently waiting for Spawn to return. So meanwhile, Forsberg is we see him again in his cell, thinking about Winn, thinking about how Forsberg sees himself as Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, and he's created a monster. And he should have been able to sense that Winn was bad, he wasn't pure, and again, just beating himself up for giving him the power that he needed to become such a terrible person. So I think Forsberg is a little hard on himself here, but you don't necessarily blame him for this, considering what he's been going through. So Spawn does locate him, and as Spawn is heading his way to the cell, making all kinds of noise and explosions, taking out guards and whatnot, Forsberg again fears that, hey, this could be Khan, this could be Jason Winn coming to get him. It's always there in the back of his mind. It's like the boogeyman to him. Mm-hmm. So Spawn kicks down the door, and as he enters the cell, Forsberg, in his kind of delusional mind, sees Khan coming to get him. He doesn't actually see Spawn, but it's a really cool double page spread with him standing in the doorway saying, "Forsberg, I've come for you," and Forsberg clutching the box. He says, "You can't have it. I won't let you touch them. Not again. It's my box. It's my box." And what's in the box is actually the last remnants he has of his wife and son. And it's kind of sad that Al doesn't really care. He's like, "You're coming with me, crazy guy. I'm sorry. I'm saving you, and you're coming with me whether you like it or not." And he drops the box, and that's how the issue ends, as it falls open on the ground, and we see the head for the Luke Skywalker doll and the dress, at least a piece of the dress that his family was wearing. And again, that's all this Forsberg guy has left of his family, and he's leaving it behind, saying, "My family needs me. My family needs me." But clearly, Al Simmons, in that mode of, hey, mission first, he doesn't care. His walls are up. He's not thinking. But what's interesting is the parallels you can draw between what Forsberg has lost and what Al Simmons has lost. Mm-hmm. Al Simmons was never able to give Wanda a child. Maybe he would have been able to eventually, but was killed by Jason Winn. And so in a way, he lost any chance of ever having a child. And clearly he lost his wife. Forsberg's lost the same because of Jason Winn. He's lost his child. He's lost his wife. So in a way, they're sort of kindred spirits, but Al can't see the forest for the trees here. We can as the readers. But here's Forsberg, blames Winn, but also blames himself for the power that he helped Winn amass. Al's never stopped to consider that. Mm-hmm. Al's never stopped to consider, hey, all the missions I undertook, all the successful operations, whatever, that helped to empower Winn in a lot of ways as well. So there's a lot of parallels between these two characters, and I wonder if McFarlane will play with that at all. But in a way, it's a pretty simple issue. I think, in recapping it, we can cover it pretty quickly. But it's certainly an issue that visually is stunning, has so much to offer, and for that reason, it's one of my favorite issues. And like I said, I may go after we finish recording and look, man, are any of these pages available anywhere? Because
you can get it printed.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, as much as I'd want an original page of one of these, at the same time, it's like, man, I almost would want the colorized version because the colors are so fantastic from Haberlin and Kemp and Jason Gorder. So, what are your thoughts on the issue?
I really liked it. For me, this one was not as interesting. We mentioned before how it doesn't carry the momentum of the story at any kind of great pace. The last several issues, it's like stuff's happening. All right, Spawn's in hell. Okay, now he's back from hell. Okay, now he's got conflict with Terry. Now they're fighting together. Okay, they're working on a team and they're doing missions. Awesome, cool. Bam, bam, bam. And then here, it kind of slows it down a little bit. It's like, okay, we've had a lot of stuff going on lately. Let's just slow it down. All right. They're still doing that stuff, but Al and Terry's side of things takes a back seat in this for what is relatively it's almost a one shot in a sense, because we're following a completely different character, someone that we haven't met or heard of before. And he just kind of, he's here now, and we're going to get his whole perspective on things. And now we know a little bit more about Jason Winn through this character that we just met. And a lot of the time you'd see like one shots in comics do something like this, you know, like this would be like a special where it's like, okay, what's it like in the day in the life of someone who lives in the Marvel universe or something, you know, just like a random average Joe. This is like the random average Joe that just happens to exist in Spawn's universe. And you know, he's obviously not an average Joe. He's connected to all these major players, but still, it's interesting that they chose to follow his perspective and deep dive what's going on with him instead of, you know, kind of going the action hero route like they have been with Spawn and Terry. Like, why not follow Spawn's perspective as he's like finding out who Forsberg is and then busting into the place and killing the guards and then getting Forsberg at the end. You know, it's interesting that they opted to take a more emotional kind of story approach instead of having that action-oriented superhero thriller kind of thing happening following Spawn and Terry. They decided to follow the character who's emotionally and mentally damaged, who's going through a lot, who he's hurt and he's sad, and there's really nothing that can make his situation better, except being taken out of that situation, and maybe one day you could like improve on that. But they opted to take a more emotional story approach instead of an action story approach. And
yeah, I
I
mean,
feel like that's
Spawn doesn't even show up until page 14.
yeah, until almost the end.
Yeah,
So,
we're 2/3 of the way through the story, and then he finally
and then
shows
he
up.
shows up. And yeah, I think that's just, it's an evolution in the way that these stories are being told. At first, there definitely, like early on in the series, there absolutely was a push to have action-oriented storytelling. There was, you know, some of that long game, like emotional arc. Let's dive into the psychology of these characters. Let's tell a more serialized story where like the events of one issue have direct consequences on others. But it's definitely an evolution in the storytelling in that he's choosing to tell more relatable and impactful stories that you'll remember because of the trauma. You know, it's such a sad story. He didn't mean for all these horrible things to happen to him. It just kind of happened. He got betrayed by Winn the same that Al did. And like you were saying, you know, there's a lot of parallel between these two people. They're both victims of Winn, and they both were allies of Winn before and helped further Winn's goals. And yeah, like they're just two peas in a pod in a manner of speaking, and they're tied to this in one way or another, and how they choose to approach it going forward, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and I did appreciate us catching up with Cy-Gor as well, and that's a fantastic page from Capullo there with the glowing red eyes and all the detail in the hair and whatnot. So yeah, we'll have to see when, because that's a confrontation that's been a long time coming.
Yeah,
And we know
I
so
think it was
little.
teased back in like issue 40
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Yeah. And we've
With
only
Coach.
gotten like, oh, he's, you know, on the countryside now. Oh, he's there now. Oh, he's, you know, we just got little snippets, like single pages or even half pages of him just like making his way slowly to New York, and now he's here. So we'll have to wait and see what that confrontation looks like and what the consequences of it will be.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you in terms of, yeah, we just don't have a lot of Spawn. I mean, we don't have a lot of real estate here with Spawn and Terry on the page, so it's hard to really talk about moving their story forward. But yeah, and that's why this, I think, reads a lot quicker, feels a little faster paced because we don't really know this Forsberg guy, and he, narrates the first 2/3 of the issue. But I can't argue with the execution just because the art is so fantastic, especially with those limited color palette pages. Yeah, obviously the splash page with Cy-Gor, and then the double page splash of Spawn finally breaking in. I mean, again, look at all the detail in the skin, on Forsberg, on the wall, on the door. Just fantastic work from
that dramatic Dutch angle.
Yep, yep, it's fantastic. So, all right, any last thoughts before we close it out?
No, I'm all good.
All right, everybody, that'll do it for this episode. Again, we really appreciate you joining us. Don't forget to be sure to follow us on social media. Just do a search for The Comic Source and you'll find us. We really appreciate your support as always, and we will talk to you next time.
Later.